Hello, my name is Aaron Armstrong, Black Cat Forge Welding and Leathercraft. Today I want to talk a little bit about anvils, anvil selecting, and height of an anvil that it should be when you're working metal. First off, I want to talk about different types of anvil. There's one anvil that really gets a bad rap that I kind of had a negativity towards when I first started, and now that through experience I have realized they're not really a bad anvil for the beginning smith. And most of the information you will find on cast iron anvils, also referred to as ASOs, which is anvil shaped object. When I first read about them, I took it as, okay, stay away from them completely. Through experience, and a lot of people, and I was included, we go to railroad track anvils and make our own. I did that, and believe it or not, I came back to a cast iron anvil when I started. It actually has more working surface than a piece of railroad track. It's heavier, it's more solid, even though it may not have as lively of a working surface as other anvils, but it has the same, and in some cases, more rebound than a piece of railroad track. But before we go on to that, I want to touch in on selecting the size that you're going to want to work with. Okay, at the very bottom of the weight class, it's called jeweler's anvils. They weigh in from 0.3 to 5 pounds. Then we go into benchtop anvils, which are 5 to 50 pounds. Then our stake anvils, which I have an example one in the shop. We go from 5 to 100 pounds. Then it's 50 to 150 for farrier anvils, and these are also considered portables. Then we go into our shop forging anvils or forging anvils, and they're anything from 75 up to 500 and even bigger. So, to get started, these two here are cast iron anvils. Now this is an older cast iron anvil, and they're made out of cast iron, which I'm also going to go over the grades right now before I forget, and then I can get rid of my paperwork. At the very bottom, the worst grade for anvils there is cast iron. Okay. Then we moved up to chilled cast iron, which is no longer made. Next would be hardened ductile iron. Then it's steel plate on cast iron. Not too bad, but it's no longer made either. These would be your older anvils that you might find in an old barn. Then there's cast tool steel, which is probably the most common within anvils that you'll find. There's a steel plate on a wrought iron body, which was a very good anvil, but it's no longer made. You'll find those in older anvils, probably stuck in a barn somewhere. The number one material for an anvil to be made out of is forged tool steel. And I have a couple examples of those in the shop that I'll go over. So, we'll get back down here to the cast irons. Now, this is an old cast iron. I've had it pretty much my whole life. My dad picked it up. It's 150 pounds, so it falls into the forging class, in the forging weight class, so a shop anvil. And as you can see, I'm going to do a hammer test here, but I use a ball bearing. Why they call it a hammer test, I don't know. A ball bearing gives much better indication of the surface of the anvil than a hammer can, and I don't like to see hammers hit the face of an anvil, no matter the quality of the anvil. If you were to come into my shop and do a hammer test with a hammer on my anvil, I'd probably throw you out quicker than you could throw the cat out. So, you want about, that's the only problem with that, you want it above 50% would indicate a very good surface. This one is right at a little above, probably about 60 to 70%. So it's not a great surface, but it's still probably one of the hardest surfaces in a cast iron I've seen. And it has a pretty nice working surface. I had to do a lot of resurfacing to it. I didn't modify the horn at all because of sentimental reasons. Being I grew up with it, I wanted to keep it the way it was, even if it's not a real good anvil. Now this is probably the most common anvil you're going to find for cheap. It's cast iron. You can pick them up at Harbor Freight. You can pick them up, and these are the ones that most people are warning about when you read on anvils. Because people that are selling these are trying to market them as a quality anvil, and they're not, okay? But I still like working on them better than I do a piece of railroad track for a couple of reasons. They got a nice working area. It's the same distance as a standard anvil, about 5 inches. The horn will typically come as a shape as this one. Not real conducive for forging. It's flat on top. It's kind of hard to do bends on. This one I took a grinder to and I rounded it to more the shape of an actual horn. So it actually works quite well. My students work on it and they do pretty well on it. But you'll see, and this is where they're talking about, it has very little rebound. So it's actually kind of soft to work on. But that rebound on that, when we do a hammer test on the railroad track, it has the same, this is the same as this. The rebound is the same. So you're not really getting anything better out of it. And plus, when you're working on this, you're working on a bench type. Here, you're working on a portable. So it's a lot heavier. It's more solid. May not have the rebound, but when you're just starting out, you're not going to really notice the difference between that. And by spending $50 to $100 on a cast iron anvil versus 2 to 3 days making a railroad track anvil, that's 2 or 3 days that you can actually be forging and actually be making projects, which is the fun part of blacksmithing. Now, this is the most common anvil that you're going to find around. It's a cast steel anvil. This weighs in at 165 pounds, so it's in the class range of a shop anvil or a forging anvil, but it's a farrier style anvil. And as you notice, compared to the cast iron, it's shorter and blockier. It's got more meat underneath the working areas. That is of a forging style. This has a longer horn, a longer tail out here, and its horn is longer and it's more conducive for working with horseshoes. So there's not as much meat down here. The horn has a lot more meat than some other horns will with anvils. This style is typically referred to as a London pattern. It's a single horn. I'm not going to go over the different parts of the anvil per se, technically, because there's lots of that information out there, and you guys can, if you really want to know the different parts, you can go research that. It'd be a good practice for you, and it'd be a good lesson to do your own research. As with anything that I'm saying here, do your own research. This is all my personal experience and what I found out throughout the years. Typically, your cast steel is going to give you about 80–90%. They've got a real good rebound to them. They're nice to work on. The disadvantage to cast steel, like cast iron, they can still chip along the edges. Not as bad or as readily as a cast iron, but they still will chip. So we're going to move in here to the drop forged anvils. This is a portable drop forge made by Rigid, which is also Pettinghaus. Rigid bought Pettinghaus. Pettinghaus is one of the only commercial makers that make anvils that are drop forged tool steel, which means it's forged. Very good quality, less likely to chip on the edges. This is of a German style with dual horns, which I like because I do a lot of detail work, so having the second horn taper down in a flat spot makes it really nice for working on. And as you can see, also very good rebound. Nice, very lively working surface to work on. If you're starting out blacksmithing, you're not going to notice that until you get a chance to be able to work on some different anvils. Okay, here we're going to drop down a little bit. This is what's considered a stake anvil. For the most part, they were usually used by tinsmiths. I like to use it for detail work because it has a real tight horn, nice round. I use this for making rings. I've got different adapters I've made for it. Very versatile. I've modified this one to fit into the hardy hole on my anvil. Typically, these would have been mounted solid in a block of wood, and hence why they were called stake anvils. They would have been sharper and they would have been just pounded down into a tree stump or anything like that. Before before I forget, because I'm liable to forget, we're going to go over to the cheapest anvil you can get, but probably the second most used anvil in my shop, and that's a wood anvil. These I have no problems with making. The railroad tracks, I've made quite a few, and they've taken a lot of time that I could have spent forging, so that's just something to consider. Railroad track anvils, again, are not bad. If you want to go that route, they are free most of the time, but your time, is it free? Just something you need to ask yourself. Now this is just a standard wood block. Tree stumps will work, anything will work. Now I use the wood anvil every single day, and it's used for mainly straightening twists. And that's why I have a rawhide mallet. When I go into hammers, I'll touch base a little more on this. But we use the wood block for a couple things. Straighten out twists, because if we were to straighten a twist out on the anvil, it would ruin our twist. Another thing these can be used for is there's another type of anvil, kinda, that's called a swedge block. And I'll go ahead and touch on it over here. Now, a lot of you beginning with blacksmithing probably aren't going to start with swedge blocking, with swedges, unless you want to make nothing but spoons, ladles, bar, a lot of tenons. A swedge block has a lot of different shapes for customizing the metal to different shapes that we want. Most of the time they're two-sided. This one weighs in at 60 pounds, so it's not a real big one. Some swedge blocks, bigger ones, will have square tenons in them for doing square tenons. Real fun to work, but they're kind of specialized, so it might not be something the beginning smith is going to get into. But that brings us to another use for the wood anvil. And within the wood anvil, it can eventually become a swedge block. By working spoons, and I don't have any, in one area, you will eventually burn an area that will make working spoons very nicely, if you ever get into making those or other areas. But I use this wood anvil probably just about as much as I use my main shop anvil. So now we're going to move into the big boy, and this anvil weighs in at over 200 pounds, 125 kilos. I can't remember what that is exactly offhand in pounds, but it's over 200. It's a very nice anvil, has a very nice working surface, very nice rebound, nice shape in the horn. I like working on it a lot. With a lot of bigger anvils, they will have maybe an upsetting block for upsetting metal. But these are probably typically not what beginning blacksmiths is going to start out with. They run over $1,000. The cast steel anvils will run you $600–700. The cast iron are the most economical, and for the price, for right around $100, I feel you have a pretty good starter anvil to get you started. And I think if you've got the money to invest $50 to $100 into blacksmithing, getting a cast iron anvil, I think, is a little bit better, smarter choice to make than spending the time to try and make a benchtop anvil out of a chunk of railroad track. Now, that's my personal opinion, but I just wanted to pass along what I've learned over the years. So, have a good day, and pound it safe. Thank you.